I'm Leila O'Connor of Mama Film. We are presenting films in Lawrence, Kansas.
And my name is George William Myers. I'm from Amherst Cinema. We're presenting here in Amherst, Massachusetts.
And we are thrilled to be here with our film's director, Alika and producer, Jesy Odio. I'm sorry, I should have asked you for the pronunciation before.
Got it.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
So I'm especially excited about this film because it reminds me of some of the first Sundances that I went to, and I won't tell you how long it was, but in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the films felt so pure and real. One thing I loved about this film so much is it really had that, it took me back to those days of that kind of storytelling. And so it really moved me in that way. It's just so refreshing to see this kind of film back at Sundance. So one of the things I loved about this as well is just the pace that I think really reflects the ambiance of Hawaii. And we just don't get that authentic on-screen representation of what real life in Hawaii is like in our mainstream area. We see, things like White Lotus or, these Hollywood depictions of life. And so how important was that to incorporate that vibe from the writing, acting, and cinematography into the film, or was that just sort of the natural ambiance of the film itself as you made it and as it was written?
Yeah, so the film is sort of a hybrid narrative documentary that was rooted in my friend Naz Kawakami's actual experience of preparing to move and leave Hawaii for the first time and move to New York in the middle of the pandemic. So the origins of it was like rooted in this actual experience, and then we sort of fictionalized some elements to allow him to sort of better express some of the other, frustrations and anxiety he was experiencing. So starting from that place and then zooming out, like we want every choice that we made, we wanted to honor what his actual experience was like. And for many of us, I mean, he's a Hapa Hawaiian Asian guy like myself, and for him, he doesn't go to the beach really. He skates instead of surfs. Like he lives a sort of very interior urban life. And that's kind of the reality for a lot of people that live here. A lot of it's hard, as much as like we would all love to be at the beach all day, every day. Like we all have to work multiple jobs because it's the cost of living here is rather high. So we just kind of wanted to honor like one person's actual experience, who also I think is an avatar for many of us growing up here and living here.
Sort of in that same thread, I'm wondering about, this film has a lot about belonging and feeling a connection to a place or disconnected from a place. I'm wondering if you can talk about scouting locations and set design and, what it means to talk about place and your belonging, but then trying to, putting someone in a small apartment, in a pet store and things like that. If you can talk about that process.
We sort of constructed this narrative around what his actual day-to-day was like, and then we wanted to really honor that. And he, especially in this moment, there's so much intense introspection, I think, and alone time. So that's sort of one of the choices in terms of the set design and even the way that we shot it, was we wanted to feel as interior as possible. Sorry, mind the mind the flashing light. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna be intermittently checking on the radio station which we filmed here. Another part of the set, right? Like the set, a big set piece in the film. So yeah, again, just trying to honor his actual experiences and then like construct the most cohesive narrative around that. That was sort of the ethos of the whole film.
As a director, what was it like for you to film your actors while in many of the scenes people are masked, so you couldn't really visualize their facial expressions? Sometimes you couldn't even tell who, it wouldn't be obvious who's talking. Was there ever a consideration on your part to shoot after the pandemic or to make other accommodations to create that film?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It was definitely a tough thing to navigate, but safety was like the biggest and most important thing. So we wanted everybody to feel as safe as possible. So also, again, there was sort of like a ticking clock on the film, because this was sort of, he did have an actual timeline of preparing to leave. So, the logistics of, trying to fly him back after he moved didn't really seem too feasible. Here we go. So yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but we also like did a lot of rehearsing with masks. I mean, like we wanted to see how it would sound with that, and then construct sort of like dialogue heavy or non-dialogue heavy scenes around that as well. So that was definitely like a tricky balance. But yeah, we tried to make the best of the moment, which is, all any of us are doing in this moment.
Yeah. One of the things I'm just so thrilled to see you in the DJ booth there. But one of the things I really liked about that sort of a metaphor for him as a DJ was his relationship to kind of his community, and that was a really sort of important thing, and he expresses that. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that comment in the beginning of the film where he equates these sort of creative ecosystems of Hawaii and New York. But then at the end of the film, he talks about, not feeling at home. He talks about not looking Hawaiian enough. He makes specific comments about not feeling like he belongs. I wonder if you can talk about, that conflict within the film, or if you even see it as a conflict.
I mean, I think so much of maybe this spoken and unspoken drive for him. I mean, as he does sort of elucidate in that conversation with his friend in terms of not feeling Hawaiian enough, like, I mean, first of all, that's something I, deeply relate to as someone who's also part Native Hawaiian, who also obviously doesn't look, as Native Hawaiian as, a lot of other people that I know in my family or in my friend group. So that, I think that breeds a certain, it's a strange space to navigate. Being born and raised in Hawaii as a Native Hawaiian, but not feeling Hawaiian enough. I think there's an unrootedness or a longing that drives a lot of, just like personally me and like his decision making, and so he like myself, I think, grew up outside of his Hawaiian heritage, and he is still very interested in that. But I think that's one of the things the film addresses, is maybe at some point he can come back and try to reconnect when he's ready, and maybe that'll incentivize him to like want to be here versus there. And it's a tricky thing to navigate. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
I mean, I think the film is so well done that you understand those things. But thinking about it creatively, and there's plenty in a sort of a coming of age story, you could have left those out, but they felt really poignant to be in there. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that was really important to both of us as we constructed the script. We felt like there was an opportunity to explore some deeper things there. So that's what we tried to do.
Jesy, for you in particular as a producer, which I think producing is such a key job on the film, and oftentimes I don't think people quite understand what the producer does entirely. But so when did you get involved? At what stage did you get involved in this story, and what attracted you to it, or what made you identify with it to really be passionate about making it right now?
Yes, especially right now. Well, Alika and I had been developing another project that is still in the works and likely happening soon, but projects and films take a long time, usually longer than you'd like it to take. And the best way of describing this movie is purely gut feeling and following your intuition about right place, right time. So when Alika brought up this project, it was something that it was quickly happening, and as we were talking about it, and next thing you know, Alika said, I think we have a film here. This is getting more and more real. So I was in LA while they were filming in Hawaii, and when they flew to New York and then they came to LA on the way back, Alika and the producer and DP Chapin, who did a phenomenal job in this movie, shared a clip with me, and it was, I would say, shorter than a minute. And in that minute, I was able to really see the entire film and the message of belonging and trying to find the meaning of home and community and individuality. And it hit me really hard. And the reason why we're so excited to share this movie all over the world globally is because I'm from Costa Rica. I grew up in Costa Rica until I was 15, and I moved to LA with my family then. And it's a question that revolves in my head all day long of where is home and what does it mean to belong and heritage. And I saw that question that Naz is having throughout the whole movie, and I really, really responded to it. And it's such a hard conflict to visualize, and Every Day in Kaimukī fully captures that. And so I knew that in the end, a lot of us are constantly moving, constantly finding the meaning of home. And so much of what people tell us is our home and where we're finding our home. And I knew that every single audience member was going to resonate with this question of, do we stay, do we go? And those decisions that we're making every day. And that's how we ended up here.
One of the things that stood out was Naz is also the writer, or a co-writer of the film along with you. And one of the things that feels obvious, I guess, is he seems so at home in his skin. That character seems so natural. And I'm wondering, as a director, if that presented some challenges maybe, or if you're actually just you're witnessing, really great acting, and that there was a lot of work done on his part, or if, how that collaboration played out between you and as a director and him as an actor and writer, and what that process was like, sort of getting to the final product that maybe you each might have had different visions on, or kind of refining that process.
That's a great question. So I first kind of really met Naz as a journalist for a local publication called Flux. And he was covering one of my short films called Mama.film, which I did in 2018. And I, getting to know him through that, asked him if he'd be interested in having a cameo in the film. As someone that gets into an altercation at a party, which he was happy to do. So I threw him into this thing, it was a pretty climactic scene, and he kind of didn't really know what he was getting into, but he did wonderfully, really on his feet, and really inhabited the role. And from that point on, I was like, this guy has something special. And getting to know him throughout the years, the more I got to know him, we had a lot of similar sort of sensibilities and tastes. And, like myself, as I mentioned, he was a radio DJ at KTUH, where I'm at now. And he cares just deeply about music and film and art, and Hawaii and his friends. And so, again, when I sort of found out he was moving, we had always talked about doing a project together, and this was kind of a now or never situation. And he was into the idea also having been wanting to do a creative project before he left. So this was the perfect sort of confluence of events for that. The writing process, yeah, I mean, we constructed it around kind of like who he was to an extent. The film, he is playing a version of himself, certainly, and playing it really well. It's an interesting question, I think, to parse, because it's like the line between where the delineation between him just totally inhabiting the words on the page and some other, transferred performance is like, it's kind of hard to delineate. He's really, he just is. I think I knew that he could shoulder a feature even as a non-professional actor, because he has that comfort in his skin that you're talking about, is like how he is. And I felt like that would transfer really well on screen, and it went better than I could have possibly hoped. He's just a natural. He has a natural charisma and wit and charm, and I'm just really excited for his performance.
Oh, here is Chapin. I'm going to let him in. I'm curious for both of you, and maybe Chapin can answer this as well. What films have you been influenced in by in your career? What films maybe influenced the way that you told this story? And what sort of professional filmmaking experience or background training did you have before this? Hi, Chapin. Welcome.
Hey, Chapin. I mean, and I'm glad Chapin joined at this moment, because this is like an interesting discussion he and I had been having, because one of the exciting things about the prospect of the film before we even dove into it was like, I personally haven't seen a lot of films specifically about someone trying to move. I mean, like, there's films that like start and end there, but like that whole process and being so about it, I've not really seen that. So like, that was really exciting to me. And I think as we started to flesh the project out, I mean, Chapin and I would continually check back in on like, this is like, I don't know what the analog really is, I guess, for what, I mean, we're so inspired by like everything that you talked about earlier on, in terms of those early Sundance indie films and like mumblecore and all of those movements. So I think this is kind of like an amalgam of that in some ways. But in terms of specific films, I mean, we just we got our friend Chris Lee just compared it to Inside Llewyn Davis, which I kind of loved that for Naz and and for the film. That wasn't something that we consciously thought about, but like, I know that all of us loved that film. Chapin, yeah, I don't know if there's other specific titles.
What's tough about it is that like, I think the process of making it, like, we went from 0 to 100 so quickly on it that it was very hard to like actually consciously reference anything in a way. And so like, I think a lot of it is this kind of like constant reassessment, which is what you do on a documentary, and this has these kind of like documentary elements. And so because of that, you're constantly sort of reassessing what's in front of you and like what's happening, and being like, is this good? Is this, what are we interested in here? And so it's tough, because I think there's like it's tough to say we like really directly are referencing anything, but there's a lot of things that we've been talking about in the previous couple of years leading up to making this that are definitely probably there on the back burner.
And to add to that, I also think that I would also call it casually defying a lot of the tropes that we see often about stories like this, especially where this one is taking place. So often it was responding to what we see often taking place in Hawaii and filling in that void. So it's almost like we agree that there's actually very few films that we can compare it to. We'll start something, who knows?
Jesy,
Yeah.
as a producer. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's funny because I think there's a trend towards like a sort of like bigger, more production heavy story here in the islands, and I think that comes from a long history of like studio productions and big network TV, and then also the fact that like a lot of the stories being told here haven't been told before, and so that it just leans in a certain direction, and this film sort of in many ways consciously is trying to do something different and add to the language of films coming out of the islands and like what can be done here. And I don't think there's been a film quite like this out of the islands yet. And I think it draws from a lot of different traditions of like, early verite, of like documentary films in the US, but and then also these kind of like mumblecore and these other movements. So it's funny, it's drawing on like a little piece of a lot of different things. I think like there's elements of maybe even like the Dogma movies, but it's not like those. So it's kind of funny. I think it's just like pulling what was useful from a lot of different elements.
Jesy, for you as a producer, what films have influenced you in particular, not for this story, but just influenced your producing aesthetic?
I'm constantly looking for, as a producer, it truly is a total joy to work on a film, but I do get the most joy out of working with the director, especially that relationship. So I'm constantly always looking for projects that stand out to me as absolutely total specific tone and style. And for some reason, currently the one that stands out to me the most is Burning, that came out a few years ago. Just something as so specific in the way of capturing and exuding an energy that is constantly internalized, which I also think Alika is able to capture in this movie. So many of the things that are unsaid and in flux and figuring out. But yeah, that one's top of mind right now.
I was wondering, there's talking about this sort of inverting some of or upending some of their expectations. There was the part of me where it's like, oh, the skateboarder is the one who you usually would think is the not the good, is not good at planning. He doesn't have his act together, and he stays home. But I'm also wondering about the skateboarding part of it. There's this scene where they're talking about the transportation infrastructure is sort of underwhelming, and there are a couple of key scenes where characters are moving through the city on skateboards. I was wondering if there was something intentional there in sort of, again, subverting the way in which you view and experience a place and separating yourself from the sort of built environment that is given to you, if that's something that was sort of an intentional part of that for you.
Chapin, do you want to?
That's a tough question, because I think like Naz and these characters in this world is such a product of being like townies, which Alika and I are not. By nature, we weren't raised in Honolulu, and so like that was also a fun difference for us as filmmakers, is like really diving into this like very town experience, where people don't go to the beach and you're in a very urban environment. And Honolulu, in a lot of ways, is a weird city. It can be very pretty in a way, and then in other ways, it's got this kind of very brutalist, very cement heavy, a lot of 1960s, 1970s architecture and a lot of aging infrastructure. Like he points out in the movie, like, this bridge was built in 1961 and hasn't been updated. And there's a lot of that to living in the city. And so it's funny because I hesitate to say like it's super intentional by Alika and our team as like the outside force filmmakers, but as Naz, as a writer, a co-writer of this project, and a person who's really from this environment, yes, I think it's like a really intentional part of the way he sees and interacts with his environment here. And it's very interesting because I think that comparison of cities which is happening, which is like, what is New York and the sort of legend or myth of New York versus like Honolulu as like an aspirational place in a totally different way. And I think a lot of people come here as tourists on vacation and are very surprised how like urban Honolulu actually is. And then there's these like pockets of resortness and other things. And then like local people, you know, are living in the city and away from the city. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot going on there, but I think it's hard to say that that was like front of mind for us, I think. I don't know, maybe Alika has different.
I mean, I think it was that hybridized thing of like you're saying, in terms of like your experience shooting a documentary and then reworking, you know, how you're shooting it as you go. Like it wasn't maybe, it was intentional in the sense that this is like true to like his day-to-day life and the way that he like mainly transports himself around the city. But then as we started to construct the narrative and especially in the edit, we saw that sort of as an emergent theme. So we just kind of wanted to like highlight those things that were tease out those elements that already existed.
Speaking of, you know, cinematography and shooting in Honolulu, Chapin, you were also the cinematographer. What was it like shooting in a pandemic? Was it different? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in the sense that you wear a mask all day, and eating lunch is a little bit interesting because you're kind of like, how do we go outside and all sit far enough apart to be safe to take our masks off, but sit close enough together to still be able to talk if needed. It was a weird. I don't know that it affects, you know, what a camera or a microphone captures, other than like the mask does affect the audio quality. And I think it is kind of interesting to think about like who you shoot with a mask and like who do you introduce with a mask or not with a mask. I don't think we were very interested in COVID being like a central part of the movie, but it does take place during the pandemic. And so it was something that we were trying to carefully calibrate, where we don't want to be underdoing it, but it was also an interesting time here in the islands where like COVID was particularly light through 2020 and most of 2021, and so we had these little spikes, but a lot of times it was, you know, there wasn't a lot of cases. So I think we were operating in a sort of extreme abundance of caution, trying to like wear masks all day, inside, outdoors, everywhere, to be safe, and we never had any issues. But I don't know, it's strange because in some ways it feels the same, and in other ways there's something kind of like there's a layer there, but it's, I don't know. I mean, ultimately you're kind of trying to shoot the story, shoot faces, and get at emotion and story beats and these other things. And I don't know how much the pandemic really changes any of that. It would have been very hard to ignore for us, I think, just because we did operate on the street, and it's such a part of life. And I think it ups the stakes of the movie in ways that are important.
I would agree. It didn't feel, we've seen like several films that have come out of the pandemic, and this definitely didn't feel like a pandemic film. It felt like a slice of life, and we all could relate to that.
So glad. Yeah, that was really important to us. And also just, you know, Chapin's answer just made me think about this other thing that we've been reflecting on lately. Just like, so we shot, I mean, a year ago to this day, we were still shooting the film, but the numbers were around, 2 to 3%, the infection rates with COVID. And like right now in this moment, it's 20%. And we wouldn't have filmed the movie, you know, like if we had tried to do that this year. So this film is so much a product just of the moment, and us, that was like a lot of our discussions were about sort of like how we can lean into that and in a safe way. So it's really, we feel really fortunate that we had that window of time to shoot this safely, because it might be a while, unfortunately, before we get another break like that here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we wrap up here, we really just want to congratulate you on the film, and it's really such an honor to be able to show it here and in our community as part of the Sundance Satellite Program. But for those who are seeing the film and loved it as much as we did, is there a best way that they can keep up with it, or they can direct other people who might be interested in learning about this film or your other work? Is there a place you can send folks?
The Instagram, Every Day In Kaimukī. I think Twitter and Facebook are the same handles. The project that Chapin and I shot before that, Molokai Bound, is currently streaming on the Criterion channel. And we're developing the feature film with Google and Array and Jesy and this whole team to hopefully shoot this year. Well, yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think that's the main things. I do think we'll continue to update social media and other stuff as we know more about what's next for the film, but no big announcements yet.
Very excited that this is part of the satellite screen, and of course of Sundance. You must have been thrilled when you got into Sundance, considering that you just mentioned this time last year you were shooting the film. So that's a really wonderful feat that most filmmakers don't get. So congratulations on that. Again, we're sorry that we won't get to meet you in Park City, but we are truly honored to have the opportunity to bring it to all of our satellite screen communities. So thank you for sharing it with us. It means so much. And we wish you the best and have a great festival wherever you may end up festivaling from.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.